At this moment, we are 140-ish. When I joined MANTA in January 2022, we were 100, and my main goal was to duplicate the headcount in 1 year, which we did, me and my team. Unfortunately, we had a layoff that we needed to do, and the number of headcount, of course, suffered a little bit, but we managed during 2022 to deliver what was expected. And when I joined, I had a team already with three recruiters, two of them very technically senior, and one extremely seasoned when it comes to GTM positions. What I did was basically increase the size of the team, and add two recruitment coordinators, which is a model that I do love to work with, because it allows your recruiters to have more time to interview, to give a better candidate experience, to source more and better. Because all the admin tasks and all the scheduling that can take forever is taken care by other team. And then I added one person to work employer branding, because Manta was not a very well known company yet. So we had to develop some programs to make it almost like the new kid in the block, in the areas where we wanted to hire technical profiles, which was mainly Lisbon and in Prague, in the Czech Republic. That's where I have biggest part of engineering and also product teams. So employer branding and some recruitment marketing was needed as well as developing the processes and all the structure that you need to have, the foundation that you need to have in talent acquisition, to make sure that then you are going to work in a very agile way, a very streamlined way. And both your manager and your candidates will have an amazing experience, even though being a stressful moment, because scaling up is always a crazy moment. We all know that, but we still can do a lot of things to make it a good time.
Mm. And I think super interesting what you mentioned there regarding the recruiter coordinates. I think that is something that most companies are not having. So there's typically maybe a hiring manager working on the recruitment, then maybe someone on employer branding, and then there are recruiters who are handling the full cycle, or there is maybe a sourcer who's gonna
Mhm.
making sure that we have candidates on the pipeline. But how did you ended up in the kind of model having a kind of recruiter coordinator? Was it something that you have done in the past in a previous company,
Yes,
or kind of where did the idea came from?
yes. So first, let me tell you that I also like the model of having people sourcing, but it all depends on what your hiring goals are and on the seniority of the team. In this case, I had very senior recruiters that were very good sourcers as well. So the need was on other tasks that were basically taking their time away from doing what they really are good at doing, right? And a manager, I believe that as a manager, you need to make sure that your people are doing what they really love and what they are good at, right? Because that's what will benefit the company the most. In this case, it was like that. I've worked with different models, but I tested this model in 2019 for the first time when I worked at Pipe Drive. So I had a bigger team, of course, bigger company, bigger hiring goals. And I also had a very good team and already a very specialized team. So I had squads for engineering, squads for product, squads for go to market. And they all were very good sourcers as well. So what I was seeing was that they were spending a lot of time in tasks that are not the core of their work, but they're they need to be performed in order for the recruitment to take place. And I started to test the model, and it went super well. The feedback we got from the recruiters was great, from hiring managers as well, and candidate experience improved as well, because you have people that are focused on being in contact, first contact with your candidates, having very quick replies, making the scheduling very smooth. So this is a part of the recruitment experience that sometimes gets a little bit, I would say, people tend to forget about it. But it's very important, because these are the candidates' first impressions about your company, about your culture, and the way your recruiters work will mirror a little bit how the other teams work. So if it's kind of sloppy, not smooth, it may cause some, I would say, some anxiety on the candidates. And later, at other company, at PandaDoc, you spoke with Robin recently. I also implemented that model, but we had a mixed model. We also had sourcers on an outsourcing regime, supporting technical recruitment teams, but it was a very big volume. It was the biggest volume that I ever dealt with. So it made sense to have both. So what you will choose, it really depends on the company needs. It really depends on the team that you are facing, because sometimes I have, I would say, the privilege of picking everyone at my team from the start. Other times I don't have it, which is also a privilege, because I get to adapt and to have a total different type of connection with those same folks. But independently of having my, I would say, my own playbook, you can't jump from one company to another and just, here's my playbook, let's implement it. No, you need to assess first. Usually I say that in the first month, um, expect million questions from me, C-level, VPs, recruiters, hiring managers, and I will need to map what are the needs, what is the size, and where we want to go to before I decide this. But it's a model that I do love.
Yeah, that's super interesting, and I think
Another, I'm sorry for interrupt, but another thing that is very good in this recruitment coordinator model is that usually you pick fresh grads, right? And people that are interested in the recruitment job. So because you also have some a big struggle to find recruiters nowadays. It's not easy to find available recruiters, very complete recruiters that are not only performing interviews, but they are also good sourcers. And when you get the chance to find these fresh grads, and they start to get the passion around talent acquisition, then you start to ramp them up, and you're creating more recruiters and bringing more recruiters to the market.
mm,
I usually say that my today coordinators are probably my recruiters in 1 year time, and that's also a very a big benefit of this model.
for sure, for sure. And I think, as you mentioned, like there are of course multiple models, and it depends so much on the
Yeah.
situation. But I think the key in succeeding, and what's kind of the main topic for today, is having kind of clear responsibilities, so kind of everyone understand what is expected from them. And we're going to kind of hop into that one. And even before kind of going into the recruitment process itself and who's responsible for what, maybe take a step back to the moment when we kind of decide who we need to hire for our team. And I think this is a thing that most people who are not working in the recruitment kind of misunderstand. And what I mean by this is, for example, I just had a customer call with a potential customer. So we are a recruitment agency, and we talk about potential cooperation, and they felt like they cannot start a cooperation yet because they don't know who they should recruit next. Should they recruit people to their go-to-market teams, or to their engineering team, or a product owner or something? And then I explained to them, like, that is actually something that talent acquisition professionals can really help you to
Yes.
figure out what kind of talent we need next. So can you share a bit more on that one? Like, how do you figure out at Manta, like, who do we need to hire next? Is the team leads who are doing that on the recruiting team, or kind of who's responsible of figuring that one out?
Okay. So that is also, and it's a very good question, definitely, because it's where everything starts, right? If you don't know who you need to recruit, then what should we do? It really depends on the level of maturity of the company. And one thing I was very happy with when I joined Manta was understanding that in January we had a hiring plan for 2022. That happened because my VP of People and Culture joined 1 or 2 months before me, and she worked with finance and with the leaders of each one of the areas. So VP of engineering, VP of product, CEO, VP of sales, whatever is the area. And this is something that I recommend that is done no later than November of the previous year, because your talent acquisition team needs a hiring forecast for the next year uh, early than January, because then you are going to start behind every time. So this is something that when companies are budgeting for the next year, a big portion of budgeting is the headcount costs. How much are we going to allocate to salaries, right? And this depends on the company vision, the company mission to grow and where to grow. And that's how you understand that biggest part of the budget needs to go to the engineering team, because we have in this case a migration to the cloud, or the product is ready and it's a SaaS product already, and what we need is a bigger go to market team to make sure that we increase our leads and our customer base. So it really depends on the moment of the company, the product, and what you intend to do in the next year. What are the big goals? So it's a top. It's something that needs to come from your leadership team. If that doesn't happen, it's going to be a little bit chaotic, right? It's going to be chaotic not only for the recruitment team but for the finance team, because they don't know exactly how to budget. And then all startups, they have trend reports to send to the board of investors. So it's something that needs to be done, and independently of the maturity level of the organization, it's something that I advise to start early on. And it can be something driven by your VP of people, your VP of talent acquisition, but always working with finance and with the leaders of each department. Then, what I recommend is that the leader of that department cascades this to their team leads and understand if the budgeting that they are doing and if the hiring plan that they are doing is really accurate according to the needs of that team or not. And then you can shift some things around. But basically, this is the very important thing. If you ask me, is this hiring plan going to be the same until the end of the year? Of course not. It will change more times than we would like to, but that's the thing with startups. And if you cannot deal with this, then a startup, it's definitely not a good environment for you, because you are going to be in pain constantly. But at least you have a structure, and you know where to focus, so that way your talent acquisition team can also understand if they need to increase the number of recruiters. If yes, are they go to market recruiters, are they generalistic recruiters, are they tech recruiters or not? Are there any tools that you need to acquire in order to be more efficient? Without this, you are going to work on the dark for biggest part of the time.
Exactly. And I think kind of after we have decided who to hire, then of course kind of comes the recruitment process.
Yeah.
And I think, recruitment process can be very different regarding the role, like maybe first interview, second interview, maybe some task phase, cultural interview, or so forth. And I think there's no point of discussing maybe now like who should own which part. But I think there are kind of few very interesting things to talk about, like regarding the process. And first one being candidate experience. You mentioned that one kind of earlier there already. And I feel like most recruiters that I talk with, they realize the importance of candidate experience. They've had some coaching around that one. They can know how to create that one. But then when you bring in hiring managers who perhaps don't know the value of that one. They haven't had maybe training around that one. And to be honest, I think for recruiters, it's easier to create a good candidate experience because that is kind of your main job to do recruitment. But for hiring manager, it might be kind of the side hustle they are doing between everything else. So how do you manage at Manta to like create a good candidate experience when there are multiple people
Okay.
involved in the process?
You need to train them. That's the only thing you can do. You need to train them. You can, if you don't have a huge volume, your recruiters, if they are seniors, they can guide, and they can advise, and they can train their hiring managers as they go, because there's not a big volume, so it's possible to do it more on a ad hoc way. But even though I recommend having a training, I have my own that I've been, of course, changing over time, because things change, and the market trends are very fast to change. And I do recommend that hiring managers, and also the other stakeholders that are doing other parts of the process, they need to attend this course, and it's very important to make sure that it's something that it's mandatory. You have the buy-in from your executives. You train your executives, because sometimes your executives, they've hired a lot of people before, right? But the market is constantly changing, and some practices that were acceptable 5 years ago are not nowadays. So you need to be bold, and be able to say to basically everyone on your company that, hey, you need training, and I'm here to help you, and I'm here to make sure that the experience is going smooth. And this training is not only on the candidate experience, but also on how to make fast decisions, on how to avoid bias, um, the best way to interview candidates, some examples of the best type of not questions, but how to formulate your questions in a way that you can make sure that you're taking the most out of that moment you have with your candidate. And one thing that for me it's absolutely critical is how to hire according to the core values of the company. And that's the
Mm.
difference between hiring at Manta or at any other company that I have worked before, because it's a company with a different DNA. So you need to understand what the culture is, what the core values are, and you need to make sure that during the interviews you are checking for this culture alignment as well. And by doing this, you make sure that not only the candidate experience is great, the manager experience is great as well, because people will feel more empowered. And also, you have a low early attrition, because when
Mm.
your hiring is done in not very structured way, usually one of the first things that start happening is early attrition, and then everyone asks talent acquisition, hey, what is happening with the recruitment? Well, maybe it's not the recruitment itself.
Yeah, that's quite common, and I have very good example regarding the culture and values. Mm, we had this one customer case where we work with a SaaS company in a kind of security space, and we already had one customer from that space, and then we got another customer, and they are direct competitors.
Oh yeah.
And then the new customer asked, like, "Hey, how can you work with both of us? That we are competing against same talent?" And I said to them, "No, you're not." And the main reason for that one was like their cultures were so different that even though from kind of skill set point of view they were looking for quite a similar talent, but then from like culture point of view, value point of view, like the person who would have been a perfect fit for the other company would have suffered so much on the other company because their working styles, the culture was so different. So I think that is very true what you are saying, and
Yes.
would be actually interesting to hear. Like, how do you think the company should be kind of validating the culture, validating the value fit in a way, kind of during the recruitment process?
I think it's the cultural assessment is done in all the stages of the process, and it's not only the recruiter responsibility. Of course, everyone looks at the recruiters, at the ones that are going to invest or insist more in behavioral questions, competency based questions. But the truth is, the cultural fit can be and should be validated in all the stages of the process. It starts obviously in the first interview, and if you know exactly what your company's DNA is, it's not difficult to check for that. You can even train your hiring managers on having specific questions for each one of the core values, or you can build that together with your hiring managers. So it starts there. Then you send your candidate to a technical assessment. For instance, it can be in engineering, it can be product, it can be whatever area it is, and you will check how the candidate deals with feedback. How does the candidate deal with or how he or she behaves in a technical discussion, because sometimes technical discussions can be more hidden, and it's a good way to see how they respond to feedback, how they interact when they have very different points of view, um, how they communicate with the rest of the panelists, the questions they make also indicates you what they value the most or what motivates them the most. And then when you have the final round, which usually it's the head of the department or the VP of the department or whatever it is, it's a final check, right? And this final check or final blessing, as you want to call it, it really depends from the stakeholder that is doing the interview. It's also important on that. So in all the stages, you have different moments where you can see consistency on your candidate's response regarding our core values.
Hmm. That's a good tip. That's a good tip. Hey, lastly, we could talk a bit about kind of interesting topic. We've been talking a lot about kind of having this kind of shared responsibility between the process, doing things together. But I think kind of one interesting thing is the decision making. So kind of in the end, when we are kind of making the hiring decision and how to go for that one. And this is a topic that I've been thinking a lot, like, should everyone agree that we hire this person, or is there someone kind of owning the decision, getting the input from everyone, and then making the decision? For example, for us currently, like, everyone needs to agree that we will hire this person. Our last stage is kind of meeting up with the team, and even though the person would have gone through 3 steps, 2 interviews, task phase, and then lastly meeting the team, but if someone from the team says no, then it's a no. But what do you think? Like, should the whole team be making the decision together, or should there be one person kind of
I,
getting the input and then making the decision?
well, having the whole team deciding at some point will not be scalable. And the no, you need to understand why, uh, uh, is what type of no is this? Um, is this a no because I don't feel identified with the person? I don't need to. So it's a really a deal breaker, or it's just well, yeah, I could work with this person, but I am not extremely excited, right? But for me, the decision is always from the hiring manager. But and also the importance of training hiring managers also here, right? Um, you have mainly two roles during the whole recruitment process. The owner of the process is the recruiter. It's not anyone else. If you're the recruiter, you're the owner, and I will expect that from you, which means that you will guide it, you will make it happen, you will help your hiring managers, but you will also raise the flags. So if for me as a recruiter, and I still do a lot of recruitment processes myself, if it's a strong no for me, it is also my duty as a recruiter to advise the hiring manager and explain why it's a strong no. And I need to have solid arguments to say it's a strong no. And it happened to me last week. And it was a cultural fit. So there was other things that were important, but the cultural fit for me was um, highly concerning. So for me, it's a strong no. But my hiring manager can still decide to proceed, which is something that, again, I don't expect to happen when the connection between recruiter and hiring manager is a trustful connection. Because if my recruiter is telling me, hey, I think you're going to have problems because this is not a cultural fit. It's very far from what your team is used to work with. Um, I'm expecting the hiring manager to trust this decision. However, the hiring manager owns the decision. So you have the recruiter owning the process, and you have the hiring manager owning the decision. And this can happen also if on the meet the team stage you have one no. It is the duty of the hiring manager, in this case, more even than the recruiter, to understand why someone from their team is saying no to this candidate and understanding if it's a deal breaker or not. Because the hiring manager is the person that is choosing the stakeholders to be present in the recruitment process. So if they want their opinion, they need to hear their opinion, right? But in the end, if you understand that um, this no is not a deal breaker, and you can make some compromise with your teammate that okay, what do you think about hiring this person, but I will be more um, um, looking for specific things that are concerning you, and something needs to be said. It's not just looking at the scorecards and seeing no's and say, well, I will hire this person anyways. No, a conversation needs to be held, and some compromises need to be done. Otherwise your team will simply not want to be involved in recruitment anymore, which is also not good for the company. It's not good for you. It's not good for the recruiters. It's not good for anyone. So, owning the decision is definitely the hiring manager. The recruiter owns the process, and by owning the process, also helps the hiring manager to make good and consistent decisions. And sometimes we need to tell them, hey, what are you afraid of? Just go for it. Because sometimes saying yes, it's stressful for some hiring managers, and for others, saying no to candidates is also awful. And you need to say the opposite, which is, hey, I will reject the candidate. It's fine. You don't need to be worried with it. We don't need to say yes to everyone, especially when they are more less experienced hiring managers.